recording started.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this Crash Analysis Studio session, organized, hosted by Adam Spiker, and I would say by extension, Strong Denver, the Strong Towns local conversation group in Denver. My name is Tony Harris. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator at the national organization, Strong Towns. And today, Adam has invited me just to help with some moderation of this session, as you all analyze this crash that took place in Edgewater, I believe. So a little bit of background. Our team at Strong Towns worked with Denver on an initial analysis back in November of 2023. That's when I met Adam, and we were able to work together on that particular crash assessment. And so now it seems like Strong Denver has kind of been running their own analyses, putting together a few different activities, and yeah, just engaging in a lot of really interesting work. So in a few moments, I'm going to ask each of you to kind of just introduce yourself, give us a brief synopsis of your connection to the crash location and the community. But I wanted to just start us off with a few statistics and thoughts to just kind of frame the conversation first. So, the National Safety Council estimates that over 44,000 people died in automobile crashes in the United States throughout 2023. And we know that thousands more have suffered traumatic injuries during these collisions, right? And despite the best efforts of public safety officials, these crashes are still happening and they are affecting all of our lives. And we've found at Strong Towns that there is a prevalent misconception that automobile crashes are caused solely by mistakes that drivers make. So people are quick to say, they were looking at their phone, they were changing the radio, drinking alcohol, speeding. And it seems to me in North America in particular, right, the response when a crash occurs is to send out law enforcement and insurance agencies to really focus on assigning blame. And I think everyone here is probably aware already, right? Crashes are caused by many factors and circumstances, not just driver error. And when a traumatic crash occurs, we need to identify all of the contributing factors and address them the best that we can, so we can ultimately reduce the number of injuries and deaths that are plaguing our communities. So today we're reviewing a crash that happened in Edgewater, Colorado, at the intersection of West 20th Avenue and Marshall Street. And I have some information about that crash that I'm going to review in a moment. But I wanted to just start out by asking each of you to introduce yourselves briefly. So maybe, Adam, if you want to start, and then we can just move on down the line.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tony. So I am the nominator for this particular crash, which involved my neighbor's dog and a vehicle traveling westbound on 20th Avenue here. And I've lived in this neighborhood for about 2 years. And yeah, this location is near and dear to my heart, and I work in the transportation industry as a transportation engineer in my as my career as well. So there's a confluence of factors that are of interest to me here, and that interest has expanded kind of beyond my career into kind of community building and understanding how streets and people interact and create community in places that are great for people.
Thank you. Maybe Emily next.
Hi, yeah, my name is Emily Kleinfelter. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm currently working for the city of Littleton as a transportation planner. I most recently was working for the Denver Regional Council of Governments as their regional Vision Zero planner. And so safety, Vision Zero, multimodal mobility, that's really my world of expertise and passion. And so I'm happy to be here to try and provide some insight on the crash today. This crash location, actually, when I was working with Dr. Cog, there was it was kind of like a Safe Routes to Schools program that was being done for some elementary schools that are really nearby to this corridor. So I think that some of the community outreach that we did there really might bring some interesting insight to this. And just knowing that, yeah, there's a really interesting sort of land use context that is surrounding this corridor and this whole neighborhood. You've got a couple of schools, you've got a big commercial corridor to the south and to the east that are sort of abutting this neighborhood. And so it just kind of creates for a really interesting transportation environment.
Absolutely. Thank you. Welcome. And Jacob.
Hi, Jacob Smith here. Any pronouns. I'm currently Executive Director of National Organizations for Youth Safety, aka NOISE. I'm a car crash survivor, been out here community building around mobility justice and transportation equity, particularly for youth. But my personal connection is I am on this street at least twice a week. I in no way live near the street, but my best friend does. And so I go to her house every week. And so I see how people move and their perception of navigating the transportation experience around here with the huge commercial blocks, as Emily mentioned. And so, yeah, really happy to bring my perspective as a community member, but also, really understanding what it means to ensure equity.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think we are in very well-informed hands with all of you. I'm going to take us through a few details of the crash, and then I'll probably hand it over to Adam in a few slides. I'm just going to pull up this presentation again. So the information about the crash that we do have, we know that the crash occurred around 9 a.m. on October 10th, 2023. So that's almost a year ago. There was no crash report available to my knowledge. We know that Bruce, who is a local dog, neighborhood resident, was off leash playing in the yard, and he ran out of the yard onto 20th Avenue and was hit by a person driving a car. Now, from what we know, the motorist was driving at or below the 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, and they were traveling in a sedan, which I think is an important detail just to note down. The motorist did apply their brakes before running into Bruce, thankfully. And we know that there was clear and sunny weather on that day when the crash occurred.
And let's just jump in and say Bruce is all right. I want to show off this cute picture of him with these puppy ears. He was a puppy when he ran into the street, and he has since, he's alive, thriving, and just a good dog overall. A good friend of mine, and by extension of his owner, who was my neighbor and friend in Edgewater. And I'll add the note that this crash was right in 20th Ave splits two municipalities, Edgewater and Lakewood, Colorado.
Got it.
I guess adds to the complexity of working with two municipalities to potentially create an alternative, some change on the corridor. So yeah, let's jump to the next slide, Tony. I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, for sure. So Bruce was transported to the vet by his owner and did receive surgery to immobilize his front leg, which was broken. As Adam was saying, he has made a recovery, which we're very thankful for. The motorist stopped and exchanged information with the owner of Bruce, right? There was no suspicion of drugs or alcohol involvement, and the driver was traveling at the speed limit and under the design speed of the road. And I talked about this with Adam prior to us, getting together today. The driver's attentiveness and reaction, right, and decision to stop is ultimately what we think saved Bruce's life. So we're very thankful for that, for sure. And then here we have included a picture of Bruce with his immobilized front leg, which thankfully now has made a full recovery, right?
Indeed. And at this point, he was able to put a little pressure on it while walking around. It was an interesting recovery. I just got to see him most days. So yeah, I'll jump in with that next visual of where we are. We are in a suburb just west of Denver, right on the border of Edgewater and Lakewood, as I have mentioned. Lakewood is a really large municipality in both number of people, I think 150,000 or so, and also in land area. Edgewater is a much smaller town, nestled in just about a 1 mile by 1 mile space. And Tony, I'm gonna grab control of the presentation right here and share from my end.
Go for it.
Thank you very much. How to present. I should know this. All right, back into it. So if we zoom in a little bit, we kind of start to feel the surrounding area is more of a town. There's lots of residences, multifamily housing, a high school to our left here, I believe Jefferson High School. And Pierce Street is where we had a recent Safe Routes to Schools project constructed. And I do have a picture later that maybe we can reference if we have time. But there have been a number of other kind of traffic calming projects throughout Lakewood, Colorado, or sorry, Edgewater, Colorado, also Lakewood. They recently installed their first protected bike lane. But this is a kind of a close-up view of the specific intersection in the broader context of the surrounding area. And this X marks approximately where Bruce was struck when he was kind of playing in the yard, running around, and kind of got the zoomies. So the car was traveling west on 20th Avenue here. And you will notice the aerial I used was a bit out of date. Edgewater, the city of Edgewater had a kind of sidewalk widening project that came through that I'm representing here with this little polygon and PowerPoint here. So we do have wider sidewalks that is reflected in the images I'm going to show throughout the rest of the presentation here. But the city has also taken the initiative to reduce the speed limit to 30 miles per hour on this stretch within the past year. And again, Bruce is fully recovered from his broken leg at this point, about a year later. And we wanted to note that this type of crash is not, well, it was not reported to police. It was kind of handled civilly between the two people involved, the dog owner and the driver of the vehicle. And again, we believe the driver was going at or below the speed limit and saw Bruce running across the street and hit the brakes before running into him at it. So we think, again, that driver had a great reaction that made this a much better result, all things considered. So 20th Ave here, it is one lane in each direction with a center two-way left turn lane, with also painted bike lanes on each side of the road, with pretty substantial sidewalks on each side of the road here, each side of the street. However, these bike lanes are kind of clear zone bike lanes because they are just painted and there is no physical separator between people in the bike lane driving or traveling at probably a pace of 10 to 15 miles per hour, sometimes much slower going up hills. There's just a line of paint between that and fast moving cars that tend to go between 30 and 40 miles per hour down this stretch of 20th Avenue. And there are also quite a few people walking along the corridor, which is great. We have these nice wide sidewalks. So it's a corridor for all modes. There's also a bus route, a bus station within view here, or a bus stop. It doesn't have very frequent service, but there is bus service going both directions on 20th Avenue here. So I guess I just kind of mentioned this, the pedestrian conditions. We do have the sidewalks here on 20th Avenue. However, there are no formalized crossings for this 1/2 mile segment. So 1,000 feet to the west of Marshall Street, we do have a signalized intersection and a crosswalk. We do have another crosswalk 1,500 feet to the east at a roundabout at Harlan Street. So the wide sidewalks are great, but there is a lot of demand to get across 20th Avenue. So it's really unfortunate that, people have to take matters into their own hands here. So this is just some additional context of the intersection. We are looking south from Marshall Street. This X is going to show up in each photo of about where the crash occurred. Another look south here. We have these businesses on the south side of the road. They're looking south. And Emily or Jacob, feel free to chime in on anything you're seeing at this point, or any early thoughts based on your experience living in Denver and from your time in Edgewater here. This photo was taken at about 9 a.m. This, I think, October 1st here, and I think there was a family taking kids to school nearby. A lot of kind of walking activity that more than I was expecting for this time.
Yeah, so Lumberg Elementary is just like a couple of blocks west of Marshall and a couple blocks north. So they're probably walking to Lumberg. And then Edgewater Elementary is just east on 20th and a couple blocks north on the same block that Lumberg is on. So you definitely have families that live in this neighborhood that are using this corridor to walk. And then I think Strava is very much not a piece of data that should be used as a sole source of understanding how people are walking and biking, but it is an insight into one community of people walking and biking who choose to, track themselves using that app. And I was pulling up the Strava heat map, and 20th is bright. It's really, really bright for all cycle sports. It's a little less bright for all foot sports. Probably becoming brighter now that those sidewalk have become, looking at the aerial that you were showing at first, it's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to run on that sidewalk, but now you've got these great big wide sidewalks. So I could see that I would imagine that the people are probably going to be using that a lot more. But now you just don't have any marked crossings for a good long while. And so now that's going to create and you've got, I measured it out, and it's a 50-foot wide right of way from curb to curb. So I think, let me double check how long or how wide a lane is, but
they're about 10 foot 8 inches was my in-person measurement. I was surprised at the precision. Traffic lanes in the median turn lane.
Did you get equal measurements for the lanes? Because I feel like what I'm seeing on my near map, which is pretty up-to-date imagery, it shows that let's see, eastbound lane is a solid 18 feet. And then your middle turn lane, suicide lane, is about 10.5 feet. And then your westbound lane is the 10.5 or 11. And then you've got a bike. Oh, is there a bike lane on the?
So yeah, that's the thing. There is a completely, the shoulder striping here, I think, is completely worn away. So we have about 10.5 or 11 plus 7-ish to get that 18.
Oh, I see that. Yeah. You've got basically from Marshall to the next block where a lot of it, all of your bike lane striping is missing.
Indeed. Yeah, it's worn down by generally vehicle tires. So it's not the most it's not the safest situation, because that clear zone for motor vehicle traffic is entering the bike lane, and that's their recovery zone. So that works fine when there's no one there. That's when it acts as a vehicle shoulder. But for most of the time, I as someone who rides a bike around sometimes into Denver in the distance here, you can see some of the downtown buildings. It's not the most, it's not the best feeling in it. And I know I'm like a confident person on a bike. I've been biking since I was a little kid. But this isn't an environment that kind of brings in young people and kids. It's not a safe place for families, for example, to go on a bike ride to the nearby Edgewater Public Market or Lumberg or Mitchell Elementary here.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that in terms of the social environment of this area. I mean, there's there's businesses here that are typically only being used. There's a few businesses down there that recently closed, but the majority of those businesses right there are only being used in the evening time. And there's this added additional infrastructure of sidewalks farther back, but missing the bike lanes like actually has, in my experience, made it extremely much more unsafe in a way where everyone is being forced to navigate that area in the evening time, and there's no proper infrastructure for bicyclists to not be conflicted with vehicles, because this all they're doing is literally for 4 minutes going into that parking lot and coming right back out. It's not an extensive parking lot, it's not deep, and so I will say that. And then also there's some apartments behind there where no one actually crosses that corridor. I think that's 46. They're actually just going behind their apartment into the businesses over there as well. So I think it was great that the sidewalks were there, but it also, people are not using it because it's much easier to just go behind their apartment.
Mhm.
Right. When I think one of the testimonies that you gathered, Adam, I think from someone by the name of Anna, I want to say, stated that like the bus stops in the area felt safe, but that was like undermined by the lack of safety crossing 20th. I just wanted to point that out while I was thinking about it.
Yeah, there is a bus stop in this image. It did in January when I conducted my first speed study here. There was a bench here at this bus stop. By August, it was gone. I don't know what happened.
Oh, interesting.
Where it was moved to maybe a stop with higher ridership, but that was something I noticed over the months here. Of yeah, the bus stop is useful, but the traffic noise is something that makes it a really unpleasant place to be. You know, it's functionally useful, these sidewalks, but the speed of cars and traffic, the design speed of this road kind of creates an environment that is a little bit unfriendly to people walking or biking. Personally, I can bike down this hill and, you know, get into Denver. It works for me, but I know just because it works for me, it doesn't work for everyone along this corridor. There is, you know, this level of risk that you have to take to ride in this bike lane, that again becomes a little invisible here at these driveway locations. So I'll jump to a little street mix cross section. This is very similar to what we're looking at here. There's a slight disparity in the calculated roadway versus measured roadway width. There's 2 feet of about 6 inches of curb and about 2 feet of gutter that is not represented in this cross section. And you know, in this community effort here, sometimes our measurements are going to be a foot or two off, and it's good to conceptually work through this. And things may be off by a few inches here and there. But yeah, we do have our wide sidewalk, our bike lane, drive lane, and sometimes the stripe on the bike lane is well delineated, sometimes not. It depends on how recent the installation was and how much the city is for maintenance of that street. And for a small city like Edgewater, they can sometimes get out there sooner for their relatively small footprint. But sometimes, yeah, the roadway striping disappears. So we've talked a little bit about the development around the area. There's multifamily development lining 20th Avenue to the north, and I lived in one of those units for 2 years. And the rest of, you know, the adjacent dwellings are generally single family homes north in Edgewater. There are a ton of multifamily apartment buildings to the south of 20th Avenue and businesses for a few blocks that were in view in the previous photos. 20th Avenue is half a mile north of Colfax Avenue, which currently has 3 lanes in each direction as a parallel route. And the trend on Colfax is more of this big box style development. If you've ever watched South Park, Casa Bonita is just south of here, worth a visit. So another reason to come out to 20th Ave. Also come check out Colfax at the same time for a funny cultural reference there. 20th Ave is more small scale in its businesses and kind of nestled next to a lot of single family, but also multifamily housing overall. So important context, we have downtown Edgewater and Edgewater Public Market about 3/4 of a mile to the east here, which has a ton of public amenities, not limited to the post office, library, rec center, city offices, public park, skate park, police, and a ton more, as you'll see from this map. This is our crash location, 20th and Marshall Street. We have multifamily housing lining the street with single family kind of to the north. We have an elementary school, high school, churches throughout Edgewater, community food pantry, small businesses to the south, multifamily housing to the south, community centers, library, rec center. I mean, I'm kind of rattling off the entire list here. We have 20th Ave as a bus route as well. We have our post office, restaurants, food, drink, another elementary school, coffee, daycare, pizza, bar, Thai food, restaurants, ice cream. I mean, I really enjoyed living here for the quick walk or roll away from all these amenities. And this is kind of downtown Edgewater, which turns out was originally developed at the end of a streetcar line. I have another slide on that later, which is kind of why it has some of this people-centered charm that people are driven to. More modern version of that is Edgewater Public Market. There is a substantial parking. There's a lot of demand for good restaurants, food and drink, and just social spaces for people to exist.
Right.
And this modern version of it works well, Edgewater Public Market, as well as this more traditional development style up to the north here in downtown Edgewater. But I guess an overarching point of this slide is that all this housing is so close to so many important, essential daily amenities, like a grocery store here, also a hardware store, department store. There are so many business options in so close a range here. This green bar is about half of a mile.
Right.
And about another half of a mile, we're at Sheridan Boulevard to the east. And this is kind of this Edgewater Lakewood area that has so much to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's interesting, like as we've been doing these sessions with the national organization with Strong Towns, sometimes I think you see an environment like this kind of plopped in the middle of very walkable areas, right? And it can almost be disorienting to the point where, like, for example, I want to say when we were looking at a crash in Madison, there was a similar setup where people were talking about like, there's reference to south of this line and north of this line, and like people just have stopped crossing it, right? Because they like don't want to run the risk. Therefore, the places that they go have become limited. And not to say that that's happening here at all, but that's when I look at this map, it makes me think of that phenomenon a little bit.
As someone who lived right along this street, this was a barrier for me, the 20th Avenue. And really, it's an arbitrary municipal line. It should be one community, but it kind of acts as a barrier, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting to know that history shows us that like you see these disparities in terms of where access to other opportunities are and sort of how it makes it. But also, I think, community members not reading a book about infrastructure is like, I'm actually experiencing this right behind that multifamily housing, between that and the small business area is like honestly probably the most dangerous coming behind there, because it just feels so isolating. So these community members are not coming where that intersection is at the front. They're actually, like I mentioned, going behind there, which is like right in the heat of where we're feeling unsafe, where there's no bike lanes that are visible and so forth.
So
Something I also want to note about this area that's really interesting that doesn't show up on this map is that there was another elementary school, Mulholm, that was a third elementary school serving the community of Edgewater that closed just last year. And so with that closure, that meant that there was an increase in attendance. All of those kids that were at Mulholm were now going to the two elementary schools you see here, Lumberg and Edgewater. And so with that increase in attendance, it meant that there was going to be increase in parents driving, picking their kids up from schools, so increased traffic safety issues. So that's what led Dr. Cog to work with the city of Edgewater to create a school transportation plan for the city of Edgewater. And I can share that if we want to like share that in the notes with this or anything, but they, worked with each of the schools and the community to do evaluations of the built environment, as well as the, culture and the education and encouragement programs that were going on, and came up and developed an entire plan on how to improve mobility basically for the entire community. Because frankly, if we're improving mobility for our most vulnerable, youngest, children, those who are going to our elementary schools, then we're improving the safety for people all the way, 8 to 80.
yeah, that's such an amazing design principle. Can we design this street for an 8-year-old to successfully navigate on their own, and an 80-year-old? And those two kind of, it goes hand in hand. If you design for those two ages or small age groups, age bands there, then it works for everyone in between. So thank you for bringing that up. As a resident of Edgewater for a few years, Pier Street is a much more peaceful place to walk or roll or even drive than it used to be before the safe routes to schools infrastructure went in. And same thing down on Depew Street here next to Edgewater Elementary School, which I miscalled as Mitchell Elementary School earlier. Thank you. So some fun additional context. I mentioned the streetcar line here. This is our reference point for this in the next image here, just west of Denver, Sloan's Lake Park. So Denver originally developed mostly here in Auraria, but also Denver proper. They were two separate towns initially, but the Denver City Tramway Co. kind of built out this private network of streetcars, which connected the downtown Denver and Auraria areas with kind of the first suburbs built in Denver. And if you've ever been to downtown Denver, you may notice there's an amusement park, Elitch's, and about this location currently. It was initially located here at Tennyson and about 38th Avenue, I believe. So there was this transit build out with the amusement park as a destination for people, and it was a similar thing with Lakeside Amusement Park just off screen over here. So I thought that was a fun little regional bit of regional context, historical context I wanted to throw in. So Edgewater is also right at the end of one of these original Denver City Tramway Company streetcar lines, which is maybe a part of why it has so much of this development charm. So let's jump right into talking about speed. The city of Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Director Amy Ford is very adamant that speed is the number one, I guess, cause and risk factor of our serious injury traffic crashes and our fatal traffic crashes. And from my experience living along this corridor, I agree wholeheartedly that speed is, and from working as a transportation engineer and reviewing crash data and crash reports, speed is kind of this unifying thing that just increases risk of really terrible results. And this is a graphic from the National Traffic Safety Board, NTSB. And the risk of dying from a crash just kind of goes up exponentially with just 10, 20 more miles per hour of speed. And even in these cases of surviving the collision, it often has really serious effects to survive a traffic crash. It's not an easy experience to go through. It's something I personally haven't gone through, but I know it's incredibly difficult. Just little injuries can really make life a lot more difficult. So obviously, fatalities are something we need to avoid, but injuries as well. We shouldn't risk injury from walking around our town or our neighborhood. There should be safe options available for people of all ages and abilities. Again, whether we're 8 years old or 80, it's such an important design principle for designing a street and a place for people. And I guess another component of this, when you're going 20 miles per hour, 15, 20 mile per hour range, you just have a larger, I guess, view shed as you are driving and looking out the field. There's naturally, you just have an ability to use your peripherals and see, kind of have this wider cone of vision. Whereas the faster you go, that cone of vision gets smaller and smaller. You have to look far in front of you to make sure there are no, I guess, obstacles in your way, because intuitively we know it is dangerous to go fast, and we have self-preservation instincts. So it's such an important thing to note at speed. Another component is how long it takes to stop at certain speeds. Our original speed limit here of 35 miles per hour in a passenger vehicle takes 100 feet to stop. That includes reaction time and the actual when the brakes are applied and the friction between tires and pavement. 100 feet is pretty significant. And with increased speed, we have this exponential increase in stopping distance. And the heavier the vehicle, the longer that stopping distance is typically. So we have a lot more larger vehicles than we used to have on the roads, just within this passenger vehicle category. And electric cars are heavier than their internal combustion engine equivalents too. So with speed being such an important factor in determining if people and pedestrians survive crashes, I think it's important to consider in every single street design within cities.
I think another thing that we do talk about, but that's really, really important that you noted in that chart. Do you mind going back a slide?
Yeah.
That is a growing concern around speed, is that weight along with the speed, right? If we know that it takes a heavy truck substantially longer to stop, but we also know that the weight of these trucks and that the way that the front build compared to a sedan type vehicle, you've got the compounded, those three different factors. You have the speed of the vehicle, and then it's got this heavy weight, and then the way that the front of the vehicles now has the possibility of hitting you. You're going your probabilities of survival go down with each and every one of those, compared to, if you have a sedan type vehicle, if you have that's of a lower weight and of course functioning at a lower speed, because when it's hitting you, or especially if you're outside of a vehicle, internal damage immediately, or death when you're hit from any large truck like that. And so that's something that, of course, it's a really challenging thing that we in the transportation industry are trying to figure out how to navigate around. I mean, it's that crazy policy level of the automobile lobby, frankly. Like, how do we manage and plan our towns and communities around the proliferance of these massive vehicles on our roadways?
Thanks, Emily. And I think that's a perfect segue into, like, I guess, diving a little deeper into roadway design and perhaps examining the speeds that we saw on 20th Avenue here over 3 different speed studies. And all 3 of them indicated that, the majority of vehicles travel at dangerous speeds. I believe our 50th percentile speed. So the average vehicle was driving at 36 miles per hour across 3 speed studies here. And if we zoom to this chart here, you know, that's in between this 45 and 85% likelihood of collision at that speed. So we're lucky that driver was good, and that Bruce escaped with just a broken leg, which caused a lot of pain and suffering for him and his owner, a lot of financial difficulties as well. It's not easy dealing with injuries whether for your dog or for your child or for each of us personally, for adults, perhaps family members. So the other important point here is that drivers aren't behaving irrationally by driving 36 or 40 or even 45 miles per hour down the street. They're generally driving the design speed of the street. People often don't really respond to or fully comprehend or read every single sign on the road. They generally drive based on their feel and based on self-preservation instincts. They're not going to drive faster than it feels safe to drive, for example. So on January 8th, 2024, I conducted with some fellow people from our Strong Towns local conversation here. We conducted a speed study at 35 with the street posted at 35 miles per hour. On August 11th, we went out and did a second one with the signs had since been replaced and the speed limit changed to 30 miles per hour. And on September 29th, performed a third speed study here. So these are done with, one person generally shooting a radar gun and the other person noting the speed of each individual vehicle at the front of groups of vehicles. And this is the nifty radar gun we got from Strong Towns here for our local conversation. They helped enable this kind of this research. So from our first speed study with a speed limit of 35 miles per hour, we ended up with a pretty bell curve here. But 70% of drivers were going above that 35 mile per hour speed limit. Luckily, just 2%, 46 and higher. However, our 85th percentile speed was about 40 miles per hour. So somewhere between your 50th percentile of 35, 36 miles per hour and 85th percentile speed here of 40 is like this comfortable speed that people drive based on the roadway design. And I think based on a few previous slides, we know that that's not great. It's especially when there's so many amenities on either side of the street that people want to walk to, and so many residents of Lakewood, just south of 20th Avenue, that go to school in Edgewater at either of the elementary schools or high schools nearby. Because in Jefferson County, Colorado, which both those municipalities encompass or are within, there's plenty of travel between these two municipalities for people to go to school, go to work, see friends, etc. So the speeds we see out there are just not that conducive to a place which is often desired, and where we live. So what if we lower the speed limit from 35 to 30 miles per hour? Just a quick reference, here's our original 35 mile per hour speed study. And here is when the speed limit was reduced to 30. And we pretty much have the same exact pretty bell curve of traffic speeds along the corridor here, which means that now a higher percentage of people are speeding. A higher percentage of people are going 10 miles per hour more over the speed limit. And we had the same exact 50th percentile speed of about 36 miles per hour and 85th percentile speed of 40 miles per hour. So again, people are driving the design speed of the road rather than the posted speed. It all comes down to engineering of the street. So the difference between the second and third speed study included a radar speed feedback sign installed for both directions on 20th Avenue. So this is what it looks like. A car comes driving down eastbound, in this case, down 20th, and this sign will show the vehicle how fast they are going in miles per hour. It worked most of the time when I was out there, but there were some instances where it didn't show up for either direction. And there's an interesting subsect of people who seem to respond to the sign, and some who flat out ignore it or see it as a way to get a high score, potentially, unfortunately. So this is kind of just more of a band-aid on a more fundamental street design issue that we perceive here based on vehicle speeds. So in our third speed study, we had a smaller percent of drivers speeding. You know, there seemed to be a subset of people who would see that 30 is the speed limit and would want to go exactly 30. But that is a minority of drivers in the grand scheme of things here. And we just still have a very similar bell curve of traffic speeds as our previous two speed studies. And my theory is, well, we have the same speeds because we have the same roadway design. So an additional bit of data I collected out there was, I guess, noise sound pressure levels as traffic was going by here. And this was the peak reading I got. And I believe this vehicle had, in addition to the standard kind of loud rolling noise, when vehicles exceed about 35 miles per hour, I think they were missing a muffler or something, but we reached 82.6 decibels at just 35 miles per hour in this case, which, as someone who lived along this corridor, was very unpleasant to experience every single day and every single night while trying to fall asleep. And from the community members that I talked to, this was a common trend. There were multiple instances of neighbors and people that I talked to who were woken up in the middle of the night by the traffic noise along 20th Avenue here. My neighbors couldn't really use their backyard deck and patio area that abutted 20th Avenue just because it was so noisy and unpleasant and difficult to have a conversation at those noise levels. So per the Federal Highway Administration, this is a reference to a highway rather than kind of a more local street that we have here in 20th Avenue. However, about 50 feet from the highway, decibel noise ranges are typically 70 to 80 decibels at about 50 feet away from the highway. So I was probably I was sitting on the RTD bus stop bench about 15, 20 feet from traffic, but we reached 82 decibels. So on this local street, we have kind of highway noise. Most of the readings were between 70 and 75 decibels, and the 82 was kind of anomalous in my 30 minutes of checking, I guess, sound ranges on the corridor. But from my personal anecdotal experience, it was not rare to have these very loud noises that were disturbing to sleep and just general conversation, even inside my own home, my own apartment along 20th Avenue. And FHWA notes that exposure to noise levels above 85 decibels is considered harmful for human hearing, and hearing protection is recommended whenever sound levels exceed this limit. So to me, we're way too close to that level for just walking or sitting on the sidewalk next to 20th Avenue here. And I've been ranting a bit, so I want to hand it off to Emily, Jacob, or Tony if you have any insights at the moment.
No, I think your point is well taken in terms of the design. And I think it also speaks to the level of isolation that folks who are not driving experience in this area, and how easy it is for someone to not even recognize that they deserve a little bit more. Because I mean, if the design is so much to where speeding is such a normal aspect of that intersection or that corridor, then I think people are going to think it's normal to speed, regardless of the speeding limit. I think it's going to be like, okay, this design is actually meant for it to speed. And so I think regardless of what we say in terms of our intervention, it really comes down to like, what is the human experience and how are we like shaping the design to change that human experience?
I will say, when you looked at when you created the street mix, I was playing around with it myself, and the right of way is there. It's just having that priority for creating a safe and protected, comfortable lane for people who are not in a vehicle. That middle suicide turn lane is not necessary. I mean, maybe an engineer who can give me the volumes would maybe agree to disagree, but when I look at this street, it immediately is showing me that we should be taking away that middle turn lane, and you still have room for 10-foot, 10.5, or 11-foot vehicle lanes, and then a nice protected bike lane here. And that protected bike lane then is creating a buffer as well for the people who are walking. And so ultimately, that even though you've got a nice wider sidewalk on the north side there of 20th, it's still directly along traffic. But if you've got the bike lane buffer, you now have an even bigger buffer between you and traffic. And then you're narrowing your street, which is hopefully creating, that narrower field of vision, which is going to slow people's speeds. I think ultimately, though, we do need more mid-block, or maybe not mid-block, but we need more crossings on 20th. And I think 20th is a great candidate for the city of Edgewater to experiment with doing more of their quick builds, where they're trying out different types of materials. And that's what we're trying in Littleton as well. And, there's all sorts of materials out there that are easily installable and easily movable, right? Like, so if we were to come in and say, hey, this configuration is just not working. And so I know that there are, I think, some raised pedestrian crosswalks that are modular that exist out there. And I think that this location would be a fantastic spot for that, for them to try and, do some curb bulb outs, put in some raised modular pedestrian crossings, and really just emphasize that this is an area meant for people, for people, right? Like, it's not meant for vehicles. And so trying to bring that sense of the community back to this neighborhood. And what I love about bulb outs is that whenever you do bulb outs, you have an opportunity for art in the right of way.
Love that.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah, raised crosswalks. I was thinking about those. There's an intersection nearby my home that has raised crosswalks, and it's in an area where people typically speed. So it's always kind of refreshing for me to see the traffic's, reluctantly slow down, but it slows down, right? Another thing that came to mind was with those feedback signs, particularly Adam, when you said, people trying to get a high score, right? How much money went into putting out a feedback sign, and like, how much good could that funding have done through quick builds, or through like, putting up a temporary protected bike lane, or another form of intervention that might look and feel a little bit different. Those were a couple things that came to mind. I also had a colleague share a video from the state of Virginia this morning about ducklings, right? And how ducklings are like the most valued animal crossing a road, right? And the whole point of this campaign was, drivers are going to stop for a duckling, but they're not going to stop for a pedestrian. So you, pedestrian, you need to watch where you're going. And I was like, oh man, they had me bought into the message, right, about like drivers being careful. And then instead of asking for motorists to exercise just as much caution for humans as they do for an animal, they were like, well, pedestrians, this is really your fault, right? So I've been thinking on that today, and like how flipping that paradigm can be really powerful. Maybe getting rid of that middle lane and expecting people to slow down to take a left or a right hand turn off of this road would be one way to re-emphasize walkability or pedestrian access here. So those are a few scattered thoughts I had.
Yeah,
Now that I'm working. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
Go on, Emily. It's all you.
I was just saying, now that I'm working for a local government, I have all these thoughts around like maybe why Edgewater is moving the way that they are, right? And so I would love to know internally, they may have plans to repave 20th and are trying to be a little bit more strategic. And instead of coming in and putting in some improvements recently, they may have plans in the near future to repave 20th completely. And so when they do that repaving, they do a full improvements, like full restriping and actual building out of a protected bike lane. I don't know if that's in the cards. I would love that. I hope that is, but that's kind of how like we're trying to move, right? Like we just actually installed a lot of speed feedback signs and have gotten some feedback from the community saying, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing other things? And same with school route signs and people feeling like it's a waste of money. And, I think that sure, could money be spent on other things? Yes. But sometimes those other things do have more strings attached or more challenges that you are going to face to get them implemented. And so sometimes those things like signs are the lowest hanging fruit that if we've got the money, if there is the political support, and if it's not going to hurt anything per se, right? Like, so we might as well get them installed and then try and also follow up with doing actual like in road improvements and things like that. And, it's not a one size, or sorry, it's not just for me, one solution is going to be the perfect fix in any sort of scenario. You need to have a combination of multiple factors, and obviously it's education, but it's also going to be signs and it's going to be actual built environment infrastructure on the road. So yeah, just all those sorts of thoughts.
Yeah, education and enforcement get a lot of attention, but I think that engineering is always there. If we design the road or design the street to still have 2 lanes for cars, that's still plenty of space. We can reallocate a lot of the existing space on these types of streets to make them follow that kind of 8 or 80 design principle. And I think here in Edgewater and Lakewood, this is kind of our city border right down the middle of the screen here. So this resurfacing project, which I presume is on the map for within the next year or 2 or 3 with the pavement condition we have here. That is the opportunity to make, I guess, these safety improvements happen, because this vision for the road was laid out, or the street, the avenue, this vision was laid out, I think at least 15, maybe 20 years ago, with projections of ever increasing traffic volumes. I have never once seen congestion on this road. And that's great. It leads to predictable travel times in a private vehicle, but at the same time, its design speed is very high. And a part of that is enabled by, again, these repurposed shoulders into bike lanes and this wide center turn lane, which if someone in front of you when you're driving down 20th Avenue has their left turn blinker on, you don't really have to even think about slowing down. They're going to get out of your way and you can floor it. Luckily, we don't have right turn deceleration lanes on this street. But overall, from my experience here, the center turn lane is, I utilize it to turn left, but it's generally unoccupied space that could be reallocated in a lot of other imaginative ways to kind of create a more equitable, even distribution of space among cars and trucks in the travel lanes, sidewalks here, and space for people on mobility scooters, bicycles, scooters. and just shortening that can all help shorten the crossing distance for the many people that live in Lakewood and commute and walk to Lumberg Elementary School across 20th Avenue. Shortening that crossing distance is a really important component of street design. And you mentioned earlier about I guess the budget of municipalities. It's generally pretty tight and you have to be opportunistic. So when a city has a resurfacing project where they're going to strip the 2 or 3 inches off of this asphalt layer and put a new layer in, that is, I guess, a new layer of smooth pavement, that is tons and tons and tons of material, of asphalt, that costs a lot of money. So it's important to, when cities have that resurfacing opportunity, it's important to consider, can we restripe this street differently? Can we add those cheap materials that you mentioned, Emily, in even rubber curbs and white delineator posts that we see all over Denver? Edgewater has their own version of that with these little armadillo-shaped curbs that are over on 25th Avenue. And as we mentioned, there's been so much.
Zebras, technically.
What's that?
Those are zebras, technically, that they're
Zebras,
using.
not armadillos. I love that. I'm learning.
Only because we're trying out a variety of things as well. And so, yeah, we're looking to install quick build materials like that.
Yeah, there is so much opportunity in that space that you seem to have some hands-on experience with. It's so important to, reach out, get into contact with your city council and ask, hey, is this being considered?
And it's funny you say that. And I wish that this conversation had happened a couple years ago, because I was just, I knew something. I knew 20th had a memory to me, and I was looking at it, and a previous council member that is actually quite, he's only a couple of years older than I am. I went to college with him, lives over on 20th, and he was a councilman up until 2021 in Edgewater. But I bet he knows other previous, or he now knows, the new council members and still has some connections. And so could be a good ally on 20th to lean on.
Yeah, I will certainly be making appearances at some future City of Edgewater and City of Lakewood council meetings in the coming weeks and months here.
Definitely.
So yeah, we have been doing this open discussion, which I've really appreciated. I do have some further photos to potentially drive discussion later to continue our existing discussion. This has been really insightful, Emily, Jacob, and Tony.
I think Jacob had to drop off.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think he did drop off. Maybe 10 minutes ago, I think.
Okay, good deal.
We
got some great insight from Jacob, and I'm sure we'll get more in the future.
Yeah, definitely feel like I've learned a lot. Anything further that we want to cover today?
I'm gonna zoom.
I was just gonna
photos.
Go ahead, Adam.
I'm gonna zoom to some other photos in Edgewater, just showing what the city has accomplished recently in pedestrianizing 25th Avenue and adding these, what I presume are zebras right here, Emily. So they have this construction project recently finished up, and it's just a beautiful space. The end of the streetcar line, I believe, is right down here by Sheridan Boulevard, and Edgewater has a lot of cute shops and places that are worth spending time in. This is right next to the high school and elementary school on the west side of Edgewater. I think these are the a result of the Safe Routes to Schools grant that you may have worked on, Emily. Is that the case?
No, I didn't work on this one, but this was, I think, was the Safe Routes to Schools grant.
Lovely. This is on Depew Street, so the other Edgewater Elementary School is about, maybe 1,000 feet behind us here, and I love this design that utilizes the existing curb and gutter and the existing kind of sidewalk it's kind of a retrofit concrete design that that doesn't change your existing curb line or curb and gutter, but adds a, you know, a raised pedestrian crossing here. So Edgewater knows all of this is on the table. So I'm really happy with, I guess, the changes I've seen in my brief 2-year tenure in the town. This is 25th Avenue, and across Sheridan, there's this nifty bicycle detection illuminator here that, so you don't have to go up on the curb and click the pedestrian push button here when when you want to cross Sheridan Boulevard and access Sloan's Lake Park here in Denver.
I think if you can go back 2 slides,
Yes.
it's really important or really cool to note. So this, yeah, that road, this used to be 2 lanes going in each direction, I think, or was it only? Yeah, I think it was going in each direction. And so they've like shut down the eastbound traffic. And so it's only bikes can now go eastbound, and bikes have to share the lane westbound with cars. But because they've narrowed the road, they really created this very pedestrian, bicycle friendly environment with everything kind of, you know, up close to the road. And it is that, you know, community Main Street feel that they wanted to create. And so while they didn't create a specific, you know, bike lane for people on the westbound, excuse me, I think they've done a really good job of creating a shared lane that is slow enough for people to feel comfortable using it, of all ages and abilities. And then the other way, you know, putting it in the dedicated lane. But that's just, this is the city of Edgewater has the they have the vision and they have the creativity to take a street like 20th and transform it in the future, right? Like, I think that right now it's just time and money and you know, capacity that's probably keeping them from doing it. But knowing what this corridor used to look like just a couple years ago, it's incredible to see what it is today and how much the community loves it and uses it. And so I don't know about you, Adam, but like, I have a lot of hope for what 20th will be in the future.
I share that sentiment, and I'll add that the businesses along 25th Avenue love this as well, because this means more people, more eyes on the street, more kind of random encounters and checking out restaurants, shops, and other services offered in this little downtown block here. Now, I can also attest to this being a comfortable, low-speed bike route, despite the lack of dedicated space. All the design cues point to low speeds here, and that is the speed that people drive at into downtown Edgewater here. And you've given the city of Edgewater a lot of credit. I'm going to give credit to the city of Lakewood as well with their first protected bike lane installation. I'm super excited for the whole city and their transportation department making this a reality. And with that, I'm going to zoom back a few more slides. You know, we want to talk short-term, medium-term, long-term recommendations, and this is our existing condition. I think that the quickest and easiest thing we could do, maybe throw some cones on the existing shoulder line or bike lane line out on 20th Avenue to delineate. You know, the vertical delineation tends to be what gets a lot of attention from drivers and has material impacts on speed. So with a really small amount of effort in putting cones down, I would personally expect that 50th percentile speed to go from 36 miles per hour, maybe down to 34 or 35, with just that tiny, tiny thing. And I'm interested in trying to work with the city of Edgewater and Lakewood to potentially make that happen, and, you know, give them some free labor in conducting a little speed study here. With this right of way, a more, I guess, imaginative type thing, and I highly recommend checking out Street Mix and doing this on your local street. It's really fun messing around with lane dimensions and space and buffers. In this case, I'd probably up this drive lane up to 10 feet just to give RTD buses a little extra wiggle room. at 8.5-foot width. But really, we want this narrowing of lanes and adding of a, potential curb here would slow down the design speed to somewhere in the range of 20, 25 miles per hour, which is much more human scale. You have a much wider vision. And that would leave about 10.5, 11 feet for, business deliveries potentially for those existing businesses, or food trucks to just kind of post up and park and kind of make 20th again more of a place. There are food trucks that occasionally use the existing parking lot south of 20th and Marshall Street on the Lakewood side. But hey, for me, the more food trucks, the more food options, the better. Sometimes I don't want to make the 3/4 of a mile trek down to downtown Edgewater, where most of the restaurants and businesses are located here.
Yeah.
And this little bike lane, this fantasy bike lane of mine, it's located on the north side of the street here too, which gets more sun. There are some buildings here and trees that end up shading this side of the street in the winter, and the, I guess, existing bike lane can get really iced over and dangerous. So I often had to change my route and avoid it, I guess, due to that condition. So if, there's a lot of questions with this potential design of, there's a lot of interactions as intersections. It would, but it's fun to be imaginative, and this is a potential, one of many potential long-term, visions for what 20th Avenue could look like here from Pierce Street to Berlin Street, and with hopefully some pedestrian crossings mixed in. But with this type of design, it would be much more intuitive and easier, akin to the photo of downtown Edgewater here, where you don't really need a formalized crossing. I mean, there is one here at street level, but it's low budget. So the lower your design speed, in this case, looks like we have a 15 or 20 mile per hour design speed and speed limit. It's good when they match. The shorter that crossing distance, the easier it is to facilitate those crossings with less complexity from engineers and planners.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been going for over an hour now. I want to thank Jacob Smith and Emily Kleinfelter and for joining me as kind of local experts on 20th Avenue here. Lawrence and Emmett from our Strongtown's Denver local conversation for helping me with traffic data collection. Bruce's Honor John for his input and his story. And other Edgewater and Lakewood neighbors who commented on 20th Ave, which if we have a few more minutes, maybe we can peruse and browse those comments. They're in the following slides. Thank you, Tony from Strongtowns. And thanks for that radar gun, enabling us to gather data along 20th Avenue and other roads in Denver and the Denver metro area. And thanks, Bruce, for being a good dog. So glad you're all recovered and healthy these days.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam.
I guess we might as well spend a few minutes and potentially just chat about some community member commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. I don't have anywhere to be. I know Emily has somewhere to go at some point soon, but I'm happy to go through some of these comments.
Sure. Emily, how are you feeling?
I can probably stay on for just a couple more. I do have to jump off for another meeting soon.
Lovely.
But,
well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Do you have any final potential closing thoughts here?
I love the community of Edgewater and seeing all of the creative, imaginative ways that they are taking on transportation safety. And so I think that there's a lot of potential with 20th and with the whole community. And so I'm just eager to see what happens in the future. But thank you so much for putting this together. This has been really great to just get together and talk with you all about traffic safety along this corridor. And I'm glad Bruce is okay. What a good boy.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'll
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll jump to a few comments from my neighbors. I just,
Mhm.
they provided these through text, and I'm just kind of copy pasted them directly into here for some additional perspectives, because I guess my take on the community is no one really loves 20th Avenue, but it could be made into something that people love and a place where people want to be more, which provides so much opportunity for individuals, for community members, and also small businesses, which is something that is really important for a thriving city or town. So my neighbor and friend Anna said that 20th Ave is a main thoroughfare connecting multiple neighborhoods, popular commercial and recreational area. Cyclists, pedestrians, cars, and buses all utilize 20th, which is lined with bus stops. As someone who regularly utilizes all of these transportation modes, I have a few thoughts and concerns. So as someone who rides her bike as a cyclist, she wishes there was a physical barrier between the bike lane and traffic lanes. She frequently observes distracted drivers, and given the number of people turning onto and off of 20th into the intersecting neighborhood roads, cars can be unpredictable.
Right.
When riding a bike, it's important to, I guess, predict the unpredictable in car movements. Something, there are a lot of instances of people turning without, a a blinker, a turning signal.
Yeah.
So that the slower the design speed, the more, I guess, predictable these unpredictable things become, and the safer all road users can become.
Right. I've talked with some cyclists before too that cyclists and runners actually that have indicated like I go by making eye contact with the driver, right? They're like, that is my actual indicator of whether or not this person is aware of me being on the road. And when that doesn't happen, like the likelihood of being treated like an object rather than a fellow road user, I think can be a lot higher. So sorry, I interrupted you.
No, thank you for the input. And it can be it's a very difficult task to make eye contact with someone in a vehicle. Sometimes there's a lot that can get in the way of that.
Yeah.
As a pedestrian, Anna thinks there are very few crosswalks or sanctioned crossing points along 20th. We noted earlier, it is a half-mile straight without a place to officially cross. So what do people do? Do they walk a quarter mile to the nearest sanctioned crossing point, cross, and walk a quarter mile back to get across the street? Unfortunately, that's against our human instincts. People cross where they need to cross, where they need to access a business, access their home, access elementary school. So yeah, that's such a point that resonates with me. We have high design speed and no place to cross, so that people take the matter into their own hands here.
Yeah.
And she goes into some additional risks, and that in general, when walking or biking after dark, these risks are heightened.
Yeah, after dark, and it sounded like you said there was I think you said that some of the area gets iced over like quicker than the rest of it, right? You said based on like sunlight and what hits where. Something to keep in mind, even though that wasn't necessarily a factor in this particular crash.
Indeed. Yeah, the south side of the street gets more shade in the winter with the right weather conditions, the right storm. We end up with a suboptimal, pavement, an icy pavement, icy sidewalk. And in most cases, Lakewood and Edgewater maintain their sidewalks very well here, but the bike lanes are kind of a different story. They sometimes get snowed over, and with how sunny it is in Denver, we typically let the sun do most of the plowing work here. But weather events, it can it can make the bike lane unusable, unfortunately, in the wintertime, which is unfortunate. And it also adds that as an RTD user, the bus stops feel safe, but the safety is undermined somewhat by having to cross 20th without a crosswalk during rush hour traffic. Overall, if she were reimagining 20th, she would add a physical barrier to increase the safety of the bike lane, more crosswalks on 20th, potentially more signs, flashing lights, or pedestrian considerate structures along the neighborhood road entries that intersect 20th. I think this is an interesting one. This could work with our, existing section, it could help, but what we really want here is a lowering of the design speed to make these things less necessary overall.
Right.
But there is this,
Right.
this is reflected on 25th Avenue and those those photos that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
A few more minutes here. Moving on to Kevin M, my neighbor, community member. Shortly after moving to Edgewater along 20th Ave, I quickly discovered that the stretch of 20th Ave from the Harlan Street roundabout to Wadsworth, which is another few half mile, 3/4 of a mile west of our Pierce Street
Location.
here we've looked at, is treated as a drag strip. Once the sun goes down, cars and motorcycles speeding by was one of the many disruptions to my sleep. My housing situation offered a nice sized yard and patio, which were essentially unusable due to the amount of unenforced speeding traffic passing by. And moving elsewhere, he added, has been a breath of fresh air with quieter streets and a lack of traffic noise.
Well, it makes me wonder when you were talking about those modular installations, right? Like, what about like if those were in place, or rumble strips or something along those lines that made like a drag strip less enticing as a possibility, you know, might be something there.
There are so many options, and it's such a wide, straight road with none of these vertical elements to mitigate just driving fast. It's safe when you're driving. There's a large clear zone to your left and to your right, where if something goes wrong, you can swerve and correct real quick. It's great from a certain perspective of traffic safety, but it's a perspective that again invites a little too much speed. That can kind of lead to really terrible outcomes for people walking or people not in a vehicle, people that don't have airbags.
Right. Well, we looked at a crash location in another state in front of a university setting, and it was basically overbuilt to accommodate volumes of traffic that would happen on football game days. But there were like 5 football game days a year, right? So the other 360 days of the year, people were using this as a drag strip. That's like what one of the panelists said, was like, yeah, you know, this turns into a speedway after dark. It made me think about that with regards to volume and like how much traffic's actually moving through the area, and what you had said earlier with like not seeing congestion. And if you lived there for what you said, 2 years, I think. Yeah, and you hadn't seen congestion in that long of a period of time, that's saying something. So
yeah, the drag strip, it's an interesting statement because it is a half mile dead straight. I'm not sure how long drag strips actually are, but we did capture one vehicle at least treating it that way, going 60 miles per hour, and way too many comfortably and casually going 40 to 45 miles per hour, which again lowers that cone of vision that you have. It increases the distance you go before you could apply the brakes if something shows up in the road in front of you, like Bruce running across the road. And it also increases the overall braking distance. So there's just these compounding factors that increase risk as we increase speed and increase design speed of roadways.
Right.
Patty had a similar, I guess, comment on the noise. Living off West 20th Avenue was a great location, but I never got used to the constant noise. Cars would rev their engines as loud as they could when driving down this strip of road throughout all hours of the night. Traffic noise woke me up on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times in a night and multiple times per week. I wouldn't mind living in this area again if I wasn't so close to the road. And I'll really just a good comment about, I think this all comes back to design speed again. I don't blame the individuals in their car going fast on an empty, wide, straight road at night. And engine noise was super loud, but the more concerning thing with me is the rolling noise, which generally exceeds engine noise past 30, 35 miles per hour.
Right.
So majority of vehicles going faster than that, we're getting this, that 70 to 80 decibel range of rolling noise on this local street rather than a highway.
Yeah.
So I think that is the final community member commentary we had here.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm assuming it's just me and you now, Tony. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. And I'll leave a few resources here to close us out. The Strong Towns Crash Studio link is really what got us started on this and other similar efforts in Denver, in the Denver metropolitan area. And we have our Strong Towns Denver local conversations with info on this website here, strongdenver.city. We have a Facebook group. You search Strong Towns Denver, a Discord channel, as well as a Twitter account to announce meetings and everything.
Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you, Adam, for putting this together. I know there's a lot of work that goes behind these sessions and organizing everyone. And yeah, it's no small feat. So I really appreciate you putting in the time and energy.
Yeah. Thank you for moderating. Thanks for all your support and all your tips and tricks throughout making this a reality. Appreciate it, Tim.
Definitely. Great. All right. Well, I will talk to you sometime soon then.
Thank you very much. And for anyone watching on YouTube, thanks for sticking through with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.